The sun is shining and the sky is clear. Looks like a peaceful start to the day. But deep in the jungle, things are anything but quiet. A giant gorilla pack is currently losing its mind in the pouring rain. Right in the middle of the chaos stands Geumgang. He's perfectly still with his eyes closed, not looking worried at all. He actually looks bored, like he's just waiting for these overgrown apes to do something worth his time. One gorilla takes a massive swing, but he just leans back. The fist whistles past his face without touching a single hair. Another punch comes in, and he slips it just as easily. He's moving so fast it looks like he's barely trying. He tells them they're way too slow. It's pretty clear he's not impressed by their speed. He stops dodging and just plants his feet in the dirt. He's done playing tag and is ready to take it head-on. A smirk spreads across his face. He's actually inviting them to give it everything they've got. "Hit me," he says, standing tall as those massive fists descend from every direction. The gorillas let loose, hammering him with a barrage of strikes that should have crushed him instantly. But he doesn't budge. He stands there taking the hits, demanding they give him even more. He goads them to hit harder. These guys are barely providing a warm-up for him. One gorilla lets out a frustrated roar, finally realizing their best shots aren't doing a single thing. Silence falls as the gorillas pant, exhausted. Geumgang is still standing there, looking like he hasn't felt a thing. He sighs, deeply disappointed. He asks them if that's seriously all they've got. He decides to show them what real power looks like. A dark, crushing aura starts to swirl around his fist. He pulls his arm back, preparing to let a punch fly with massive force. His fist connects with the air, and the entire forest seems to buckle under the impact. The resulting shockwave is absolutely catastrophic. It clears the trees, stops the rain, and sends the entire pack flying into the horizon. In a single strike, the jungle has been turned into a wasteland. Geumgang stands in the center of the destruction. Meet Geumgang. People have a very good reason for calling him the natural disaster. He starts walking away from the wreckage, looking for something that might actually be a challenge. But a year ago, things were very different. Back then, he was just a thin, lanky kid saying goodbye to his family. Geumgang's father and mother were worried sick. They didn't think their weak son had any business traveling the world alone. To keep them from worrying, he lied and said he was going abroad for environmental volunteer work. He just wanted to see more of the world. His parents finally gave in, telling him to eat well and make sure he takes care of himself. He looked back at them with a smile, hiding the fact that he was actually going on a journey to finally release his suppressed power. They gave him one last hug, still seeing him as the boy who needed their protection. As he walked away, the sting of guilt for lying to them started to set in. He'd spent his whole life hiding his strength, so they wouldn't have to worry about him. But he promised himself that, when he finally returned, he would really make it up to them. Now, a year later, he's looking at a photo of them on his phone. They look so happy together. He's grown incredibly strong, but looking at his parents makes him feel a little homesick after a year of wandering. He figures it's about time he headed home. He misses them too much to stay away any longer. But standing in this wasteland, he feels like something is missing. Going back like this just feels unsatisfying. He's trained for an entire year, but he hasn't used his full strength even once. His hands are itching for a real outlet. He really wants to go all out and just smash something to bits before he returns to his normal life. That's when he spots a massive rock pillar nearby, and a wide, predatory grin stretches across his face. That's it. He leaps to the very top of the pillar, standing high above the ground. To him, it's just a mountain of rock waiting to be broken. He wants one last memory of his true power before he hides it away again. His fist begins to glow with a terrifying intensity. No more holding back, he gathers every ounce of strength for a full power strike. "Full power," he shouts. Geumgang clenches his fist, the air around it rippling with intense heat and light. He's putting everything he's got into this one strike. All-out release. He brings his fist down in a devastating strike, tearing through the air with a blinding red glow. A sudden, silent flash of brilliant white light consumes the entire area. The sheer force of the impact is beyond anything seen before. The shockwave doesn't just hit the pillar, it drives straight through it. a massive spike of energy boring deep into the Earth's crust. Geumgang looks on with a jagged smirk, watching the pure destruction unfold from the center of the blast. The rock pillar is obliterated instantly, reduced to a cloud of shrapnel as a pillar of fire erupts from the impact point. The force is so great that it rips entire trees out of the ground and sends chunks of the landscape flying into the sky. Far from the impact site, a massive beam of energy breaks through the clouds, reaching all the way into the atmosphere. From high above the planet, a terrifying crack of golden light begins to split the Earth in two. Then, in an instant, the entire world is swallowed by a blinding global explosion. In just a few seconds, 9 billion people and every living species on Earth are completely wiped out. Geumgang wakes up floating in a dark, empty void. He looks around, dazed and wondering where the hell he is. A colossal, blue-skinned giant, the king of the afterlife, looms over him. Geumgang is barely the size of a speck of dust compared to him. The king's booming voice fills the void, announcing the start of a trial for a case of extreme danger. Geumgang hangs upside down, completely bewildered. The giant declares that Geumgang is being classified as a special-grade sinner for his actions. Geumgang lands on a shimmering surface, trying to get his bearings. He finally realizes what's going on. He's dead and facing divine judgment. He doesn't look scared, just annoyed by the situation. The king's massive cyan eye stares him down, confirming that he's indeed reached the afterlife. Geumgang looks back with a sharp gaze, refusing to be intimidated by the scale of the being before him. The king of the afterlife reaches up for his gavel, ready to pass judgment on the man who ended the world. With a thunderous boom, the gavel slams down. The verdict has been reached. For the crime of destroying the entire Earth, Geumgang is sentenced to spend eternity in hell. Geumgang isn't having it. He tells the giant to shut up, claiming the only people who have the right to judge him are his parents. He yells at the king, arguing that he destroyed the planet by accident and that a real king should have stopped him. He demands that the giant use his powers to fix the Earth and bring everyone back to life immediately. The king of the afterlife looks down with pity, calling Geumgang a foolish, lowly creature for his demands. He asks if Geumgang really thinks everything is fine, just because he didn't mean to blow up the world. Then the giant drops the ultimate truth. That accident killed Geumgang's parents right along with everyone else. The color drains from Geumgang's face as the reality of his mistake finally hits him. He's left speechless and horrified. He stands perfectly still in the void, the weight of the billions of lives he ended, including the ones he loved most, crushing him. The king notices the sudden change in his demeanor, mocking him for finally showing some reaction now that his parents are mentioned. A cruel, sharp-toothed grin spreads across the giant's face. He decides he wants to twist the knife even deeper. He leans in, his massive eye filling Geumgang's entire field of vision. Geumgang looks up, his anger beginning to boil over. The king reveals the final part of the punishment. Geumgang's parents will be dragged down to hell right along with him. Rage completely replaces Geumgang's shock. He screams at the giant, his eyes glowing with a dangerous white light. A dark red aura erupts from his body, his muscles tensing as he prepares to strike back at a god. The giant just mocks his regret. The king of the afterlife continues to smile, satisfied that Geumgang is finally acting like the sinner he is. Geumgang doesn't wait another second. He leaps high into the air, winding up a massive kick aimed straight at the giant's face. The king's eye widens as the tiny human approaches with a speed and power he clearly didn't expect. The kick connects with a massive explosion of energy, shattering the giant's composure and part of his divine form. Geumgang flies through the wreckage he just created, a trail of white energy following his every move. The giant's head is engulfed in a series of powerful blasts as Geumgang's strike rips through his divine avatar. He speeds past the giant's face, the scales of justice still swaying from the force of his sudden assault. Geumgang's strike connects with a thunderous roar, and a massive explosion of light and energy consumes the king of the afterlife's avatar. The very space of the afterlife domain shatters into a million shimmering pieces, unable to contain the pure force of the human's punch. Ma Geumgang lands lightly on a floating fragment of reality, looking up to see that the colossal being's head has been blasted apart by the impact. From within the wreckage of the giant, a booming, distorted voice begins to laugh, clearly more entertained than injured by the assault. Suddenly, Ma Geumgang finds himself falling through a dark, endless void as the shards of the shattered dimension swirl around him like glass. He lands with a solid thud on a glowing, grid-like floor, his hands hitting the ground as the blinding light from above finally begins to settle. Slow, deliberate clapping echoes through the silence, drawing Geumgang's attention to a new figure approaching from the shadows. A muscular man with gray skin and a red mask, draped in white robes, steps forward. The king of the afterlife, now in a human-sized form, claps with a cruel grin. Geumgang stands his ground, staring down the entity and demanding to know who, or what, he really is. The man reveals his identity. "I am Kronos." He speaks with a tone of ultimate authority, his red eyes glowing behind the mask. The king of the afterlife introduces himself as the supreme ruler who governs all things, looking down on Ma Geumgang as if he were nothing more than a lowly insect. He admits he's impressed by Geumgang's strength and mocks the human's previous demand to bring everyone back to life using a god's power. He holds a miniature, glowing model of the Earth in his palm, explaining that undoing the total destruction of a planet would require a massive amount of power. The king of the afterlife closes his hand, stating that simply granting such a massive request for free would be far too boring for him. A sadistic smile spreads across his face as he decides to offer Geumgang a gamble, his red eye piercing through the gloom. He holds the tiny Earth on the tip of his finger, declaring that Geumgang will only get his wish if he can become the strongest being in all of hell. If Geumgang can conquer hell, the king promises to turn back time to the moment before the Earth was pulverized. To raise the stakes, the king of the afterlife summons a sphere of light containing the souls of Ma Geumgang's father and mother. Geumgang's eyes widen in shock as he sees his parents, their souls currently unharmed and pure, trapped within the god's grasp. Kronos mocks him, asking if he's willing to risk everything to save them and erase the terrible mistake he made. Determination burns in Geumgang's eyes as he asks for clarification. He just has to beat down every sinner in hell to get them back. Without a moment's hesitation, Geumgang shouts his agreement, ready to take on the entire afterlife to save his family. "Send me to hell right now," he yells, a fierce, predatory grin replacing his initial shock. The king of the afterlife laughs at his boldness and points downward, sentencing him to the depths of infinite struggle hell. Ma Geumgang stands at the precipice of the abyss, as ghastly, spectral hands begin to rise from the red glow below him. He looks back over his shoulder, a silent promise to his parents that they won't have to wait long before he comes for them. He tells the king of the afterlife to take good care of them while he's away, unaware of the god's true, cruel intentions. Kronos suddenly stops him, mentioning a penalty that Geumgang hadn't considered as he reaches for the souls again. The god reveals his ultimate betrayal. Ma Geumgang's parents are being sent to the exact same hell as their son. He drops the sphere into the crimson depths, laughing that having the whole family together in a place of eternal suffering makes it much more fun. "You bastard!" Geumgang roars, lunging forward with a fist raised to strike the god one more time. Before he can connect, dozens of gray, skeletal hands grab his legs and torso, dragging him backward into the yawning pit. Geumgang is pulled down into a thick, dark liquid, his struggle useless as the hands of the damned haul him toward his sentence. The king of the afterlife waves a mocking farewell, telling the human that he isn't nearly ready to challenge a supreme being yet. He advises Geumgang to focus on surviving and becoming the strongest in hell before he even thinks about revenge. As Geumgang plummets through the red sky of the underworld, the king of the afterlife watches with a satisfied, twisted smile. He falls through a jagged cavern where hordes of demons and muscular sinners are locked in brutal, never-ending combat. Geumgang slams into the ground with the force of a meteor, sending a shockwave of blue light and dust through the arena. He lies face down in the center of a fresh crater, the air around him thick with the stench of sulfur and ancient blood. He pushes himself up, gritting his teeth in a mask of pure, unadulterated fury as he mutters a curse under his breath. His eyes glow with a dangerous white light, his resolve to tear hell apart already solidifying. He looks out over the desolate, volcanic landscape of hell, where a giant, unblinking red eye looms in the turbulent sky. A pair of heavy black boots step onto the jagged, blood-colored rock of the underworld. Ma Geumgang lies on the ground, looking up in surprise as a voice greets him, nodding that his appearance is quite different from what was expected. A small demon girl with bright red hair, tiny black horns, and bat wings looks down at him with an unimpressed expression. A caption identifies her as Mephisto, a low-rank demon. Mephisto checks a device in her hand, confirming Geumgang's identity while he stares back at her, wondering how a demon in hell could already know his name. She casually explains that high-profile sinners come with detailed data, before offering to serve as his guide in this dangerous realm. Ma Geumgang is in no mood for games. His eyes narrow as he tells her to drop the guide routine and get to the point. He clenches his fist, a red aura of intense power flaring around him as he challenges the demon girl to a fight if she's looking for one. Mephisto's eyes widen in shock at his sudden aggression, and she quickly waves her hands to signal that she isn't interested in a confrontation. She formally introduces herself again, stating that she is a demon belonging to this specific circle of hell. Mephisto adds that she serves Lord Solomon, the administrator of hell, though she's quick to admit she's just a low-level grunt in the hierarchy. Ma Geumgang rubs his forehead, realizing that beating up a low-level worker won't get him the information he needs. He looks at her with renewed interest, realizing that as an employee of hell, she might be able to help him locate others. He asks if her position allows her to track the location of everyone who has recently fallen into this realm. His voice drops to a serious, heavy tone as he asks the one question that truly matters. Do you know where my parents are? Ma Geumgang's shadow looms over the small demon, making Mephisto sweat as she stammers that she couldn't possibly know the location of random souls. She nervously explains that they don't keep individual records for souls, unless they are classified as special-grade sinners like him. Mephisto is visibly trembling, her internal monologue racing as she wonders how a mere human could possess such a terrifying, soul-crushing presence. Ma Geumgang stands tall, a dark, menacing aura erupting from his body as he stares her down with glowing white eyes. He clenches his hand into a tight fist, the veins bulging as he threatens to kill her if she doesn't find a way to get him the answers he wants. Mephisto's face contorts in pure, unbridled terror as she realizes that this human could easily destroy her before she even has a chance to flee. She panics, screaming that she'll find out and guide him properly to ensure his parents stay safe, and she stays in one piece. Geumgang gives her a final, cold warning. If his parents get so much as a single scratch, he'll tear her and all of hell to shreds. Mephisto immediately snaps into a stiff, terrified salute, shouting her obedience as she accepts her new role as his servant. She points toward a distant silhouette sitting on a throne amidst the jagged peaks of hell, warning him that a dangerous being who preys on civilians is likely keeping his parents there. Geumgang doesn't waste any time, demanding Mephisto take him to Jack the Ripper immediately. Mephisto explains that by Hell's standards, Jack is really just a mid-tier player compared to the real monsters. As they walk, Geumgang asks who the actual strongest is, but apparently the top spot is currently vacant. He tells her that once he finds his parents, he wants to be led straight to the heavy hitters. He's planning to take them all out and claim hell for himself. Geumgang is determined to become the strongest being in this entire realm. But it's not just about restoring the earth. He still has a massive grudge against the king of the afterlife for mocking him earlier. Geumgang wants a rematch, and this time he's going to make sure his punch actually lands. Ma Geumgang isn't exactly impressed with his new guide's sense of direction. He starts wondering if she even knows where they're going. Mephisto breaks into a sweat, insisting they're basically there. She's just a little unsure of the exact spot. Geumgang calls her out for being sloppy. The little demon tries to play it off, reminding him it's her first day on the job. Inside, she's fuming. She can't believe a mere sinner is talking back to a demon like this. Suddenly, a strange girl with wings and bird-like legs drops down in front of them. She's holding a small mummy and decides Geumgang looks like he might be a useful new recruit. She introduces herself as the Sphinx Girl, a recruiter for the Pharaoh's Pyramid organization. She tells him he should join up, claiming it's a rare opportunity to be part of a proper system in hell. Geumgang just smirks. He's not really the type to go around joining factions. The girl laughs it off, saying everyone tries to act tough at first. She warns him that whatever status he had while he was alive doesn't mean a thing down here. To prove her point, she gestures toward a massive, multi-eyed monstrosity lurking in the background. She insists that ordinary people need to stick together if they want to survive the nightmare. Geumgang actually stops to think for a second. He figures if they're a big group, maybe they can help him find his parents faster. Mephisto isn't having it. She whispers that the pyramid group is just a bunch of power-hungry scum. The Sphinx Girl hears her and gets right in her face, asking the kid to repeat herself. Mephisto's expression shifts. She drops the act and tells the recruiter to get lost. A massive surge of demonic energy erupts from her, lighting up the entire wasteland. The recruiters don't stick around to find out what's next. They book it as fast as they can. Mephisto watches them go, thinking about the guy she's supposed to be guiding. She's a literal demon of hell, yet she realized she was actually feeling intimidated by a human. She tries to shake it off, convincing herself it was just a split-second fluke. But the real test is coming up. She wants to see how he handles a legend like Jack the Ripper. Geumgang doesn't care about her inner monologue and tells her to get moving. They reach a desolate valley filled with makeshift crosses. This is the place. Geumgang scans the area, looking for his target. He spots a lone figure sitting quietly on a stone in the middle of the graveyard. Mephisto warns him that the Ripper likes to take his time with his victims. Geumgang gives her a chilling look. If his parents are hurt, he's tearing her and all of hell apart. He looks back at the graveyard. It seems the hunter has finally noticed them. Jack the Ripper stands up, his eyes glowing with a manic intensity. He has a wide, jagged grin, looking forward to carving up some fresh prey. Without warning, the killer vanishes into a blur of motion. He moves like a bolt of lightning, zipping through the field of crosses. He's all over the place, using his speed to create an opening from any angle. He skids across the ground, pivoting for a killing blow. He drops from above, bringing his blade down with everything he's got. A shockwave of blue energy explodes on impact as the two collide. But the Ripper's blade isn't moving. Geumgang caught it with 2 fingers. The legendary killer freezes in midair, completely stunned by the casual block. Geumgang stares him down. He's got a few questions and the Ripper is going to answer them. Geumgang doesn't just block, he seizes the weapon right out of the air. Jack tries to use his speed to circle around, but he's basically standing still. The killer pulls out a second blade, refusing to believe his first attack failed. But as if Geumgang would let him have that much time to pull his stunts, he thrusts his hand towards Jack. With just a simple flick, he cancels out that flashy demon's entire combo. He doesn't even look at the scrap, instead asking where his parents are. Jack starts to sweat, realizing he's picked a fight with a monster. He throws his hands up in a fake surrender to buy some time. Geumgang pulls out his phone and shows a photo of his mother and father. The killer leans in, squinting to get a better look at the targets. He points into the distance, claiming he saw people like that earlier. He tells Geumgang they went over that way, putting on a helpful act. Geumgang isn't buying it. The guy's story is way too convenient. Jack can't help himself. The thought of fresh victims has him licking his lips. He keeps the charade going, acting like a friendly local. He asks for more details, trying to lure Geumgang into dropping his guard. But the helpful act is just a setup for a dirty trick. He spits a burning metal ring straight at Geumgang's face. It whistled past Geumgang's face, but a split second later, a lethal projectile tore through the air, aimed straight at his eye. A devastating shockwave erupts the moment Jack's weapon slams straight into Geumgang's face. Jack drops the mask, gloating that he'll find the parents and tear them apart. No sooner had he finished his sentence than he realized with horror that his blade was stuck fast. Jack never saw it coming. Geumgang had caught the blade, clamping down on it with his bare teeth. The air gets heavy as Geumgang's patience finally runs out. He tells the Ripper to repeat that threat, his eyes glowing with a cold light. Sensing the danger, Jack tries to dart back into the shadows. He fills his hands with daggers, ready to shred everything. He leaps into the air and rains down a storm of steel. Dozens of blades whistle down, aimed to pin Geumgang to the dirt. Instead of dodging, Geumgang just takes a deep breath. He exhales a literal shockwave that tears through the air. The blast is so powerful it shatters every single dagger mid-flight. The Ripper stands frozen as his weapons fall as useless scrap. He's lost for words, staring at a man who just breathed his attack away. Before he can react, Geumgang's hand clamps onto his face like a vice. He hoists the killer up and slams him vertically into the ground. The impact creates a massive crater, sending a pillar of dust into the sky. He holds Jack's head deep in the rubble to make sure he's done. He looks down at the broken mess of a legend with pure contempt. From the ridge above, Mephisto watches the aftermath in total silence. Her jaw is on the floor. She's never seen a sinner do this to a high-tier soul. She knows Jack has survived a century in hell, yet Geumgang just crushed him. Mephisto gapes at the broken Ripper, unable to believe a legend was snuffed out so casually. She looks at Geumgang's back, shivering from the sheer weight of the aura he's putting out. Miles away, a long, ornate telescope swivels, focusing on the scene of the carnage. Pharaoh, king of the pyramid, a lean man in white robes and a gold mask, watches through the lens. Behind his mask's permanent grin, the king notes Geumgang's impossible physical prowess. He doesn't just want to watch, he wants to claim this power for himself. He praises his subordinates, a Sphinx girl and a mummy, for finding such a high-quality recruit. Pharaoh turns back to the telescope, analyzing Geumgang's behavior through the magical glass. He notices the man isn't just killing, he's searching for something with a clear obsession. A sinister plan begins to form in the Pharaoh's ancient, calculating mind. The telescope shifts to focus on a couple walking through the hellish mist, Geumgang's parents. Pharaoh decides that these two are the key to making the monster in the red pants obey him. Oblivious to the eyes watching him, Geumgang marches forward with singular focus. The air in this layer of hell is thick with the scent of sulfur and old blood. Deep in the wasteland, Ma Yeonmin and Wang Sunai struggle through the jagged terrain. Geumgang's parents look completely out of place in this nightmare realm. Yeonmin leans heavily on his walking stick, his body aching from the relentless heat. Every breath feels like swallowing hot coals as they wander the desolate ruins. Sunai checks on her husband, her own face etched with exhaustion and fear. They are so small that a passing giant ogre doesn't even notice them as it stomps by. Yeonmin realizes this isn't a dream. They are truly trapped in a land of literal monsters. His heart breaks at the thought of his son being trapped in this same horrific nightmare. Elsewhere, Geumgang sits on the remains of a massive beast, his thoughts on his family. Mephisto returns from a scout, reporting that there's still no sign of his parents nearby. She feels a pang of guilt, having led him into traps that he simply smashed through. Unfazed by the traps, Geumgang asks for the location of his next target. Mephisto begins to wonder if this man actually has what it takes to challenge the true kings of hell. She tells him the next one is a genuine top-tier powerhouse, not a low-level thug. Geumgang's eyes narrow, his appetite for a real fight finally being whetted. As they trek through the rocky expanse, he asks for more information on this new opponent. Mephisto describes a creature that wakes only to lay waste to everything in its path. They approach a cave that hums with ancient, primal energy, the den of a legend. Within waits the 99-tailed fox, a giant white-furred creature with glowing blue eyes. A small, predatory smile plays on Geumgang's lips at the mention of a top-tier foe. He walks toward the cave entrance, looking more like a casual tourist than a monster slayer. A low, rumbling vibration shakes the ground, echoing out from the dark throat of the mountain. Deep inside, the white-furred fox shifts in its sleep, its massive tails twitching. Its giant, glowing blue eyes snap open, sensing the arrival of an uninvited guest. Mephisto warns him that they are standing in the very heart of the fox's territory. She suggests searching for his parents quickly while the beast is still groggy. They stand on the edge of a massive pit, looking for any sign of life in the gloom below. A sudden, violent eruption of dust from the crater answers his question about the fox's location. Geumgang stands calm as a mountain-sized shadow falls over him, nodding that their host is finally awake. The 99-tailed fox, a colossal beast of white fur and primal fury, looms over the intruders with predatory intent. Mephisto gazes up in absolute horror, realizing that huge doesn't even begin to describe the creature before them. The fox's glowing blue eyes lock onto them, radiating a spiritual pressure so heavy it feels like the air itself is solidified. Despite the overwhelming display of power, Geumgang remains perfectly still, his expression unreadable. His eyes narrow, his focus sharpening as he begins to analyze the massive target in front of him. The beast snarls, its fangs bared as it prepares to erase the tiny human from existence. Instead of fear, a dark, eager smirk spreads across Geumgang's face. He casually marches forward, completely ignoring the creature's menacing growls and the sheer disparity in their sizes. Mephisto watches from the sidelines, baffled by the strange standoff between the man and the ancient beast. With a sudden burst of speed, Geumgang lunges into the air, his fist ignited with a scorching red aura. He slams his fist into the fox's side, the impact creating a shockwave that rattles the very foundations of the cavern. The massive creature was sent reeling backward, its sheer weight gouging a deep trench into the stone floor. From the sidelines, Mephisto could clearly see one of the fox's tails had been completely obliterated by Geumgang's latest strike. It skids to a halt, a low, guttural growl escaping its throat as it struggles to comprehend the strike. Glowing white fur and spiritual fragments drift through the air like snow, marking the loss of a legendary tail. Geumgang follows up with a heavy kick, and Mephisto realizes with a start that the beast has just lost a life. He doesn't give it a moment to recover, landing a brutal uppercut that snaps the creature's massive head back. The fox manages to right itself, its many remaining tails whipping around as it prepares a counteroffensive. The counter on its lives drops rapidly, plummeting from 99 down to 88 in a matter of seconds. Geumgang wipes a small trickle of blood from his cheek, his smile only growing wider as he feels the sting. He lets out a low chuckle, relishing the fact that he's finally found someone capable of making him bleed. The 99-tailed fox stares back in silence, its ice-blue eyes reflecting a newfound sense of caution. Blue lightning begins to arc across its fur as it gathers its spiritual power for a massive energy emission. The entire cavern hums with the fox's power as it prepares to go all out against the human in the red pants. The 99-tailed fox charges up, its claw glowing with concentrated blue energy. A massive swipe cuts through the air, but Ma Geumgang just leans back, letting the blast whistle past his face. Mephisto scrambles back, barely keeping her footing as the landscape gets torn apart behind her. The legendary beast isn't holding back, crackling with lightning as it lunges for another kill. A beam of pure energy slices through the sky. It slams into the cliffs, vaporizing solid rock into a pillar of blue fire. The fox focuses its power between its paws, preparing a wide-scale attack. Dozens of energy blades rain down, turning the entire cavern into a death trap. A massive blast goes off, white and blue light swallowing everything in sight. The shockwave nearly sends the little demon guide flying as she stares at the carnage in disbelief. Geumgang stands in the middle of a fresh crater, admitting the fox actually has some decent power for a top-tier being. He easily dances around another vertical blast, mocking the beast for firing blindly and hopping for a lucky hit. The guy closes the distance in a blur, landing a solid punch right on the fox's snout, instantly erasing a chunk of its lives. He doesn't give it a second to recover, leaping high into the air for the next strike. Another heavy blow connects, sending out a shockwave that rattles the air. A massive explosion rocks the cavern as the beast is hammered into the ground. It's a complete beatdown, Geumgang moves so fast he's stripping away the fox's tails by the dozen. The 21-tailed fox lets out a roar that would normally send any sane person running. But Ma Geumgang isn't exactly sane. He's already in the air, charging straight at the beast. A massive shockwave ripples through the air as he makes his move. He's got a wild grin on his face, clearly enjoying the thrill of a real fight. He starts laughing hysterically, hyped to find something that can actually take a punch. Mephisto watches from a distance, wondering if all humans are this unhinged. He pulls his fist back, focusing every bit of his insane strength into one strike. The punch connects with enough force to shatter the ground beneath the giant fox. A massive pillar of light erupts, shooting straight up into the crimson sky. Geumgang hangs in the air for a second, surrounded by the swirling energy of his own strike. The energy beam is blinding as it hammers down on the mythical creature. The 21-tailed fox is buried under the pressure as the landscape begins to disintegrate. A huge crater opens up where the beast once stood, swallowing everything in sight. Mephisto can hardly believe her eyes. This newbie is completely off the charts. Thick clouds of dust and smoke fill the air as the energy finally starts to settle. Deep in the wreckage, a small pair of glowing eyes peeks out from the shadows. The giant monster is gone, replaced by a tiny, wide-eyed white fox. Turns out, he punched it so hard he depleted its lives until it only had 2 left. The little guy looks around, completely drained and terrified out of its mind. Geumgang lands and looks down, disappointed that his toy just got a whole lot smaller. He starts yelling at it to grow back and keep the fight going. But the tiny fox is too busy shivering to think about fighting back. He begs it to bite him or scratch him, anything to keep from being bored. The fox decides to give up entirely, rolling onto its back like a common pet. Geumgang just stares in disbelief, realizing his sparring partner has officially retired. Little did they know, as the battle raged on, their clash had already caught the eyes of Hell's deadliest powerhouses. Sphinx Girl is flying through the sky, carrying a mysterious bandaged bundle. She muttered to herself that this newbie wasn't half bad. Inside the wraps is Jack the Ripper, now processed into a mindless, toothy servant. The scout is still shaking, trying to make sense of the power she just witnessed. Suddenly, Mephisto drops out of nowhere and lands right behind her. Sphinx Girl nearly jumps out of her skin, definitely not expecting a hitchhiker. Mephisto tells her to drop the formal talk. She's got bigger things to worry about. She hitches a ride on the scout's back, taking control of the mission. She realizes Pharaoh's group won't be enough to handle a monster like Geumgang alone. Her new goal is to form an alliance with the top-tier powerhouses of Hell. Sphinx Girl agrees, but she's clearly terrified of what happens if they fail. Mephisto makes sure she knows the human's name, Ma Geumgang, so she doesn't forget. She looks back at the crater he left behind, sizing up her new target. She's determined to stop him before he tears down the entire hierarchy of the afterlife. She pins Sphinx Girl down, making it clear that she expects results, not excuses. She sends the scout off to pitch the alliance to Pharaoh's lackeys. Mephisto watches her go, swearing she won't let a battle junkie like him rule Hell. Mephisto is fuming. She's determined to break Geumgang's spirit no matter what it takes. But honestly, her confidence is mostly just for show right now. She sighs, having a sudden reality check about how she was too scared to even speak up in front of him. Still, she thinks she can use his goal of finding his parents to eventually get him under control. She looks up, surprised to see the man himself standing right in front of her. Ma Geumgang just stares her down, asking what she's bothering him for now. She can't believe her eyes. He's just casually petting the legendary 21-tailed fox like it's a house cat. To him, it's nothing, just a small reward after a quick and easy fight. He explains that most beasts he fights end up like this, even the ones supposed to be top tier. Mephisto is speechless, realizing he subjugated a literal yakai fox by sheer force alone. She starts thinking that maybe she should have warned the others to bring a lot more backup. Meanwhile, back at the Pharaoh's domain, things are getting a lot more political. Pharaoh, king of the pyramid, is holding court, and he's been keeping a very close eye on Geumgang. The sheer level of power he's seeing is way beyond anything he ever anticipated from a human. He decides right then and there that he absolutely must have Geumgang for himself. He orders his followers to go ahead and push forward with the top-tier alliance immediately. But he's not just stopping there. He wants the Demon King and Succubus Queen Helen involved too. He's planning to play all the kings of hell against each other, using the human as the perfect excuse. He laughs to himself, hoping his greed finally pays off this time. He tells Sphinx Girl to keep searching for whatever thing can actually break Geumgang's resolve. And it looks like they already found the perfect talent to help them get started. Someone is being brought in, and they're definitely not coming in willingly. It's Jack the Ripper, and he's being dragged in by mummies. Pharaoh acts all polite, pretending like this whole thing is just a little misunderstanding. Jack finds himself kneeling before the massive throne of the king of the pyramid. Pharaoh addresses him directly, bringing up his recent humiliating loss to the human. Jack is clearly sweating, knowing he's in a very dangerous spot. Pharaoh tells him he's free to refuse, but then shows him exactly what the alternative looks like. A group of terrifying mummies and thugs are just waiting for the order to tear him apart. They're showing off their weapons, making it clear that Jack doesn't really have a choice here. Jack gulps, realizing he's completely trapped. He immediately drops to his knees, begging to do whatever they ask of him. Pharaoh loves the attitude, telling Jack he's about to become one of his new friends. But in the Pharaoh's world, being a friend is a lot more painful than it sounds. He tells the group to welcome their new companion. Jack starts screaming as the mummies swarm him to begin the processing. Sphinx Girl watches as the transformation begins, following Pharaoh's orders to the letter. When they're done, Jack isn't even human anymore, just a multi-limbed monstrosity bound to Pharaoh's will. His humanity is gone, replaced by whatever horrific creation Pharaoh needed for his plans. Word of the alliance starts to spread, reaching all the way to the Demon King's castle. Pharaoh's emissaries arrive at the gates, loudly declaring their presence and their master's name. They're being watched through a crystal ball as they formally propose the alliance to the castle's ruler. The Demon King smirks, clearly unimpressed by the offer being presented to him. With a simple snap of his fingers, he begins to summon a terrifying amount of dark energy. The sky above the castle churns with unnatural lightning as his power overflows. A massive bolt strikes the ground right in front of the castle gates. One of the emissaries is instantly vaporized by the blast, leaving his companion cowering in terror. The message is sent loud and clear. The Demon King has officially rejected the alliance. Deep in another part of hell, the emissaries reach the domain of the Succubus Queen. They look like tiny ants as they present their case before her massive, ornate canopy bed. Succubus Queen Helen lounges comfortably, listening to the proposal with a bored expression. At first, she doesn't seem to care at all about political games or alliances. But then the name Ma Geumgang is mentioned, and her eyes suddenly light up with interest. A wicked smile spreads across her face. She's decided it's time to head out and see things for herself. She activates her pheromone drain, her eyes glowing with an eerie, seductive light. A powerful pulse of purple energy erupts from her, shaking the very foundations of her palace. The seductive aura spreads across the landscape like a poisonous fog. Far away, Geumgang is still walking, completely unaware that a new predator has caught his scent. He stops for a second, sensing a strange shift in the air, but he doesn't let it distract him. Helen watches him through her magic, absolutely enamored by the raw strength he radiates. She turns back to the trembling emissaries, her breathing becoming heavy with excitement. She's obsessed. She can't stop thinking about how much effort it must have taken to build such a perfect body. She laughs, knowing that men who have spent their lives in self-denial are the easiest for her to break. With a playful wink, she blows a magical heart-shaped kiss toward her audience. The tiny hearts land on the cheeks of the emissaries, instantly sealing their fate. Their eyes turn into hearts as they scream their eternal loyalty to their new mistress. Helen struts away with a confident smirk, having already forgotten their names as she adds them to her collection of slaves of love. She orders her new army to prepare for a full-scale march toward her, intended. A literal sea of heart-eyed soldiers roars in unison, ready to die for a single glance from her. The entire region is mobilized, with a massive army of the love-struck marching through the red canyons. Meanwhile, Geumgang is busy dealing with a much smaller and much grumpier companion. He's literally using the legendary 99-tailed fox as a living compass, much to Mephisto's confusion. He explains that he's just borrowing the animal's natural instincts to track down his parents' scent. Mephisto admits it's a smart move, since yokai foxes are incredibly sensitive to the energy of living beings. However, she's still very skeptical about the whole cooperation part of the plan. She knows that even though he beat the fox into submission, its heart is still as proud and stubborn as ever. The fox, a creature of immense power and pride, sits there looking completely done with this human. Geumgang doesn't care about its pride. He just wants to know if it can actually act as a guide dog. The fox lets out a sharp bark, seemingly agreeing to the task for now. "Good, let's go," Geumgang says, as Mephisto follows behind him with a worried look. He looks off into the distance, his determination burning brighter than ever. He can almost see his parents' faces, and he silently promises them that he's coming to save them. Elsewhere, Sphinx Girl is on the move, flying through the red sky while carrying the mutated Jack the Ripper. And Queen Helene continues to lounge atop her bed, carried by her endless army of obsessed slaves as they head toward their target. Ma Geumgang stands tall with Mephisto and the tiny white fox, ready to face whatever comes next. His expression is intense, his eyes fixed on the horizon as a massive power approaches. "What are those?" he mutters, sensing a rhythmic thumping in the distance. Mephisto looks worried, recognizing the unique signature of the incoming force. Ah, of all times. In the distance, an army of shirtless men with heart-shaped eyes marches forward, carrying a massive canopy bed. Mephisto explains, "That's Helene and her slaves." Succubus Queen Helene lounges on her bed, giggling to herself about how quickly they arrived. She looks Geumgang up and down, clearly impressed by what she sees. "Oh my, up close you're even more tempting." With a flutter of her large bat wings, she descends from her bed toward the group. "I am the ruler of males, the queen of pheromones, Succubus Queen Helene," she announces grandly. Her purple eyes glow with a hypnotic light. "I've come in person to make you my slave, consider it an honor." Geumgang isn't interested in her titles or her beauty. "If you're here to fight, drop the nonsense and just come at me." Mephisto watches with dread, knowing that Helene is the absolute worst possible opponent for someone like Geumgang. Helene's charm skill isn't something that can be countered with mere physical strength. She makes a small heart gesture with her fingers, radiating an aura of absolute seduction. Mephisto wonders how the blunt warrior will possibly handle this kind of magical assault. Helene smiles confidently, referring to the mindless men behind her as her slaves of love. She orders her army to attack, commanding them to fight until they drop. The men, completely under her spell, roar with a terrifying, singular devotion to her heart. One of the larger slaves lunges forward, his eyes glazed over and filled with purple hearts. A whole squad of muscular slaves follows, their bodies bulging with unnatural energy. Geumgang doesn't even flinch as the first attacker swings a massive fist at him. With a single lightning-fast strike, he sends the first slave flying into the air. Geumgang's smirk grows wider. He's more than happy to use his fists to break any spell. In a blur of motion, he begins to systematically dismantle the entire army of slaves of love with brutal efficiency. Ma Geumgang is wadding through the crowd, dropping these guys like it's a warm-up. They've got literal hearts in their eyes, but he's not exactly feeling the love. A kick connects, sending another one flying. It's less of a fight and more of a one-sided cleaning job. From above, Succubus Queen Helene watches the chaos unfold. She can't believe her warriors are getting dismantled this easily. She's genuinely confused. She handpicked these guys and buffed them herself, yet they can't even land a finger on him. Helene's getting obsessed. She decides right then and there that she's making this guy hers no matter the cost. She blows a heart-shaped charm his way, turning up the supernatural heat. Ma Geumgang just looks up at her, completely unimpressed by the flashy light show. The charm flies right at his face, and he casually tilts his head to let it pass. It's like he's dodging a fly. Helene isn't used to being ignored. She tells him to stop dodging and just accept her gift. She lets out a massive barrage of heart energy, trying to swamp him in pheromones. Ma Geumgang's patience is officially gone. He blitzes through the crowd, leaving nothing but a blur behind. He winds up a punch, and the air around his fist practically screams from the pressure. He slams his fist into the ground, and the resulting shockwave levels everything in the vicinity. Helene watches the explosion from above, her confident smirk finally starting to flicker. The force of the blast sends her tumbling back through the air. While the dust is still settling, Ma Geumgang casually lifts a boulder the size of a house with one hand. He fixes his gaze on the queen, ready to end the interruption. He hurls the massive rock right at her. Helene realizes she can't play nice anymore. If he's going to be wild, she'll have to break him. She summons her queen's pheromone whip, a massive coil of pink energy that lights up the whole wasteland. She's got that manic look in her eyes now. The fun and games are over. She lashes out, the whip cutting through the air with a crack that sounds like thunder. The terrain gets absolutely shredded. Pink energy explosions crater the ground everywhere the whip lands. Mephisto and the little fox don't want any part of this, scrambling to get clear of the crossfire. Helene laughs as she pours more power into the assault, asking him how he likes a real fight. Her brainwashed minions are still cheering for her, even as they get caught in the collateral damage. Through all the flashing lights and smoke, Ma Geumgang just stands there, looking bored out of his mind. The pheromone-laden energy crackles around him, but it's doing absolutely nothing to slow him down. He stares at the massive glowing lash and asks if it's just a big, ordinary whip. He gives a small, condescending smirk. To a guy who punches gods, a magic whip is just a glorified rope. Ma Geumgang isn't just taking the hit. He's grabbed Helene's whip and is refusing to let go. He's even got a grin on his face, clearly enjoying the struggle despite all the pink energy sparking around him. One good tug, and he's dragging Helene right toward him. Helene can't believe it. Her whip is supposed to be her ultimate weapon, not a rope for a tug-of-war. She's completely shocked because nobody has ever been able to handle her pheromone whip like this before. The energy surges as she tries to regain control. She decides to stop playing around and reveals the whip's true purpose. It's not about the physical damage. It's about the rosy pink pheromones she's just dumped all over the area. She raises her hand, getting ready to activate her special move. With a snap of her fingers, she triggers the conversion process. A massive pillar of purple energy swallows the battlefield. Mephisto watches from the sidelines. She's worried that Geumgang might have actually gotten caught in the trap this time. Mephisto wanted him to be taken down a notch, but she definitely didn't want him becoming some mindless slave. Helene floats down through the pink mist, her chest heaving after putting that much power into one attack. One of her generic slaves looks up at her, sensing the queen's command. The guy is completely gone, heart, eyes, and everything. Helene stands there like she's already won, basking in the glow of her victory. She's feeling pretty good about herself right now. She walks right past her groveling minions without a second glance. She tells Geumgang that he's the first person who's ever forced her to go this far. She's genuinely surprised to see him still standing. Geumgang is holding his ground, but he's clearly straining to keep his composure. He grits his teeth, realizing his body isn't doing what he tells it to anymore. Helene reaches out, thinking she's about to put the finishing touches on her new pet. Mephisto is watching the whole thing with a look of pure dread. She realizes Helene is about to use her ultimate skill. She tries to shout a warning, telling Helene she can't just use a move like that in public. But Helene doesn't care. She goes straight for Pheromone Max, getting right in Geumgang's face. Mephisto can only watch in horror as the energy peaks. Geumgang lets out a roar as the pheromones hit him like a freight train. Helene pauses for a second, wondering if she finally broke him. Instead of collapsing, Geumgang screams that he's actually overflowing with power. Helene just smiles, thinking the energy surge is exactly what's going to snap his mind. She tells him he'll be feeling this good for the rest of his life as her loyal slave. She flicks a little heart of energy toward the ground. She looks down on him and orders him to kiss her feet. Geumgang just stands there in silence, his head bowed. Helene thinks she's finally got him right where she wants him. Then Geumgang looks up, completely calm, and asks her why she stopped fighting. Helene's jaw drops. The guy is perfectly fine and he looks bored. Without another word, Geumgang winds up and socks her right in the jaw. The impact is so massive it practically levels the terrain, sending a shockwave through the whole wasteland. The dust starts to settle after that monster punch, leaving a massive crater where Helene used to be standing. Ma Geumgang just stands there, looking completely unfazed by the destruction he just caused. He looks down at the crater, waiting to see if she's actually done for the day. Helene is barely clinging to consciousness, her ears still ringing from the impact of that hit. She's completely thrown, both literally and mentally, unable to process how a human could hit that hard. The shockwave was so intense it actually cleared the entire area of her lingering pheromones. She starts coughing up smoke, her composure completely gone. She stares up at him, repeating that this shouldn't be possible. Her mind is stuck on one question: how did this happen? She doesn't understand how anyone can just ignore her maxed-out pheromones like they were nothing. Geumgang looms over her, his eyes glowing with that same intense white light. Helene is sweating bullets, looking up at him with wide, trembling eyes. Geumgang winds up another fist, looking like he's about to end the fight right here. Helene just closes her eyes and accepts it. She'd rather have a clean death than beg for mercy. She waits for the final blow, telling herself that a queen never begs for her life. Instead of hitting her, Geumgang punches the ground right next to her head, shattering the rock. Dust and debris fly everywhere as the ground craters just inches from her ear. Helene opens one eye, looking completely confused that she's somehow still alive. Geumgang pulls his fist back, having sent his message loud and clear. He lets out a deep breath, the glowing light finally starting to fade from his eyes. He looks down at her and asks a simple question: why should he even bother killing her? Helene just stares, her pupils vibrating as her brain short-circuits at the mercy she wasn't expecting. She tries to warn him that in hell, if you don't finish the job, trouble always comes back to bite you. But Geumgang just laughs it off, looking down on her from his height. He tells her that kind of thinking is exactly why she's nothing but a weakling. Helene is left speechless, but something about his absolute confidence is starting to mess with her head. She grits her teeth, trying to find some sort of comeback to save her pride. But then another little explosion of realization hits her. She hates to admit it, but the guy actually sounds kind of cool. She tries to brush it off, calling him annoying to hide the fact that she's actually flustered. Geumgang starts walking away, leaving the succubus queen sitting alone in the dirt. Her hold over her slaves starts to break, the purple energy around them finally dissipating. The men start to wake up, looking confused about where they are and why they're in a wasteland. Helene just sits there, completely unable to fight back or even look him in the eye. Meanwhile, Mephisto is flying in with the 99-tailed fox, having watched everything from a safe distance. She lands next to Geumgang, telling him that things are mostly cleaned up and they should get moving. Geumgang isn't in the mood for talk, so he just grabs her by the head to shut her up. Mephisto starts complaining, saying she shoved her pride aside just to help him out here. She looks back at Helene, who is still staring at Geumgang's back. She still can't believe he actually resisted all that temptation without breaking a sweat. She realizes that it wasn't just willpower. She's certain of the real reason now. His brain is so stuffed with thoughts of fighting and finding his parents that there literally wasn't any room for her pheromones to work. Mephisto realizes Ma Geumgang's difficult personality actually worked against Helene's charms. She's stunned by how much more impressive the guy is than she first thought. Ma Geumgang tells the succubus to get a move on and start the search. Mephisto explains she recruited him specifically for his ability to track down souls. Helene and Mephisto share an awkward, silent moment before getting to work. Helene wonders why a demon like Mephisto is even following this human around. Ma Geumgang demands to know if she can find his parents immediately. Helene clings to his arm, promising to begin the search right this second. He asks what she's doing as she prepares her tracking skill. She strikes a pose, charging up her pheromones to catch a scent. She gets into the zone, ready to scan the surrounding wasteland. She notes the signal is faint, likely because the father's male pheromones are lacking. Suddenly, a vision of Ma Geumgang's parents appears in her mind. Ma Geumgang mocks Mephisto for being less useful than a human sinner. Mephisto snaps that she isn't just a simple search specialist. She sulks, clearly annoyed that Helene found them so much faster. She starts to regret her earlier bragging as the succubus continues her work. Helene pauses, sensing that the situation at the location is getting dangerous. Far away, Ma Geumgang's parents are terrified as monsters approach them. Sphinx Girl and Mummy Man move in, looking for an easy catch. The two monsters loom over the helpless couple with wicked grins. Sphinx Girl laughs, saying it's rare to see someone genuinely happy in hell. She pounces forward, telling the parents they should all just get along. The parents huddle together, bracing for a fatal blow that never comes. Sphinx Girl's predatory smile is inches away from her targets. Suddenly, a beam of blue energy slams into the ground right in front of her. Sphinx Girl is stunned by the sudden and powerful intervention. The force of the blast sends her tumbling backward through the dirt. She hits the ground hard, unable to understand what just happened. The parents stare in shock as a new figure appears in the smoke. A mysterious knight clad in white armor stands tall before them. His glowing yellow eyes reveal a power far beyond any normal demon. Mummy Man cowers in fear, recognizing the threat immediately. He screams for Sphinx Girl to run, terrified of the knight's presence. The knight is surrounded by an intense blue aura, looking like a total monster. Sphinx Girl remains overconfident, thinking she's still in control of the situation. She dreams of getting promoted for successfully capturing the targets. She clutches a small bandaged doll, her mind stuck on her own ambitions. Mummy Man realizes they're in way over their heads and starts to panic. He doesn't wait a second longer and turns tail to flee from the knight. With a single lightning-fast strike, the knight cuts through the air. Mummy Man's severed hand falls to the dirt as his escape is violently cut short. Sphinx Girl decides that the only way to stay alive is to give up immediately. She begs the mysterious knight for mercy, offering an unconditional surrender to save herself. The knight remains cold, stating that those who have sinned deserve nothing but punishment. Sphinx Girl is horrified as she realizes her plea for life has fallen on deaf ears. The knight prepares a final blow, declaring that every criminal present will perish right there. Ma Geumgang's parents huddle together, paralyzed with fear by the knight's overwhelming power. As the blue energy erupts, the father screams out his son's name in a final, desperate cry. A massive shockwave tears through the ground as Ma Geumgang finally makes his entrance. The protagonist is absolutely livid, his eyes burning with rage as he finds his parents in danger. The dust starts to settle in the wake of a massive explosion. Ma Geumgang and his group stand over the crater, but Helene worries they might have shown up too late. Ma Geumgang remains focused on the scene ahead. At the bottom of the pit, a winged demon is barely clinging to life. The demon recognizes him immediately, wheezing out his name with a bloody grin. He mocks Geumgang, telling him he's lucky he didn't run into the monster who did this. The demon reveals that the same freak took his parents. He mockingly wishes them luck as his strength fails. Geumgang doesn't care for the insults, he just needs to know which way they went. Helene checks the body and confirms the demon is dead. Geumgang stares into the distance, his patience wearing thin. Helene offers to use her tracking skills one more time. She tries to turn it into a flirtatious moment, suggesting they spend some alone time to recharge her powers, much to Mephisto's annoyance. Geumgang shuts her down instantly, reminding her that his parents are in danger. The little white fox starts sniffing around the rocks, picking up a scent. It points toward the horizon, and Geumgang gets ready to head out. Geumgang watches as the little creature begins to change. A blue aura surges around the fox as its hidden power is finally released. Its form shifts and grows as the energy intensifies. The tiny fox transforms into the massive giant white wolf. Geumgang is genuinely impressed by the transformation. He asks why it didn't just do this from the beginning. Mephisto explains that its power just finished recovering, and the wolf form won't last long. He gives the wolf a quick pat and says it's time to go. Helene hops onto the beast right behind him. She keeps trying to talk about her pheromones, but Geumgang is focused. He tells her he doesn't care what she does, but if she slows him down, he's leaving her behind. Helene just swoons even harder over his cold attitude. They take off across the wasteland at incredible speed. Mephisto is left standing in a cloud of dust, wondering why she was left behind. The giant white wolf leaps through the air, racing toward the parents' location. Back to what happened earlier, another demon is being cornered by a figure clad in shining armor. The mysterious knight stands protectively in front of Geumgang's parents. He unleashes a blast of holy light, terrifying the demons nearby. One of the monsters tries to sneak away while the knight is busy. But the knight notices immediately and prepares to strike. A massive pillar of light incinerates the creature. The demon screams as it's completely erased from existence. The mysterious knight stands triumphant, his sword still crackling with power. His eyes are calm and righteous as he looks back at the humans. The parents beg for mercy, still terrified despite the help. The knight asks if they're hurt. They're stunned to see such a heroic figure in the middle of hell. He reassures them not to worry, because his powers tell him they aren't sinners. The mysterious knight formally introduces himself as Bellis, a hero. He apologizes to Ma Geumgang's parents for moving too fast, admitting he's not used to traveling with others. Seeing how exhausted the couple is, Bellis suggests they take a break in the canyon. They reassure him it's fine, though they're clearly struggling to keep up. As they rest, the father notes that while Bellis seems like a good person, there's something intense about him. Bellis remains silent, his expression stern and focused. The parents are just glad they didn't run into any more dangerous sinners along the way. Bellis explains that he purposely navigated them away from any threats. He reveals he has a special skill that lets him detect good and evil in those nearby. He tells them that's exactly how he knew they were innocent souls. In fact, he admits they're the first good people he's ever found in this wasteland. His real mission, however, is to hunt down an exceptionally heinous sinner. He thinks back to the moment his holy purpose was revealed. The goddess appeared to him, telling him his true duty wasn't just to slay the demon king. She spoke of a greater evil lurking in the shadows of hell. Bellis was shocked to hear there could be anything worse than the ruler of demons. The goddess reminded him that a true hero's duty is to protect the weak above all else. Returning to the present, Bellis repeats that vow, promising the couple his protection. The parents are moved to tears, thanking him for the first kindness they've seen since arriving in hell. The father hesitates before speaking up about their biggest worry. He explains that they have a son, but describes him as a thin and frail boy. He's terrified that his son might not have survived the harsh environment. They tell Bellis the boy fell into hell too, and they can't bear the thought of what happened to him. Bellis gives them a reassuring smile and promises to find and protect their son as well. The couple is overwhelmed with gratitude for the hero's nobility. But the peace is short-lived as Bellis suddenly draws his sword. He senses something approaching and warns the parents that he is coming. Bellis detects a terrifying aura, realizing it's not the demon king but something else entirely. He orders the parents to hide behind the rocks while he handles the threat alone. Despite his own nerves, he knows he must stand and fight because he is a hero. The parents scramble for cover, looking back at their protector with worry. They beg him to be careful as they watch him face the incoming storm. Bellis grits his teeth, bracing himself for the impact. It's been a long time since he's felt such an overwhelming pressure. Lightning cracks across the sky as the presence draws closer. He shouts out a challenge, calling for the evil one to show themselves. A massive silhouette appears against the red sky, riding a giant beast. Bellis watches as the dark figure looms over the canyon. Geumgang and Helene look down from the back of the giant white wolf, appearing like true villains from this angle. The giant wolf lets out a low, menacing snarl. Geumgang's expression is cold and unreadable as he scans the area. He finally spots what he was looking for tucked away behind the rocks. Geumgang looks down at the scene below with a calm, analytical gaze. Helene remains perched behind him, her bat wings silhouetted against the crimson sky. The mysterious knight, Bellis, stands his ground, drawing his glowing sword and warning the newcomer that they won't be going any further. Believing he has found the source of the greater evil the goddess warned him about, Bellis marks Geumgang as his target. Geumgang, meanwhile, looks somewhat confused by the knight's aggressive stance. Bellis lets out a fierce battle cry, labeling Geumgang a kidnapper, based on the assumption that he has taken the parents hostage. From behind the rocks, Geumgang's father and mother peek out, their faces filled with confusion and shock as they witness the confrontation. They are completely stunned to see their son, whom they described as frail, appearing so powerful and intimidating. Without another word, the two powerful figures clash. Bellis swings his radiant blade with all his might, but Geumgang meets the attack head-on with a devastating punch, sending a shockwave through the canyon.